Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Elise, and this is literally Elise. Today I want to talk to you about all the books that I read in the month of February. Oh my goodness, that sun just illuminated the entire room. So actually the first book I want to talk to you about is the one and only book that I read in the month of January. My reading year did not actually start out that great, and because I only had the one book, I did not do a January wrap up. The book that I read in January was When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. I did not like this book. This book is a horror fantasy, and it follows this girl who discovers this little boy hiding in the bushes, and she then kind of feels like she has to protect him and take care of him, and they go on the run from this monster of sorts. I do not understand the hype when it comes to this book. I was extremely disappointed. So here's my review on Fable. I'm so mad. I really should have DNF'd this, but because of all the amazing reviews and claims of it being mind-blowing, I decided to push through the slow as molasses story, and this was very slow. And I also kind of feel like nothing happened, and what did happen was just stupid. This was a reminder for me that hype and popularity don't always align with my literary needs. The plot never fully came together, and while I could see what the story was aiming for, it was ultimately unsatisfying. I will say the short chapters, writing style, and the character of Cookie were somewhat enjoyable, but everything else had me raging. I literally threw the book to the end of the couch when I finished reading it. Is there anything that could have made it better for me? No, probably not. I just thought the story in and of itself was really dumb. Well, that was rude. My battery died. It lied to me. It said it had well over half battery life left. Okay, where were we? I also kept hearing in reviews that there was some massive twist or like mind-blowing ending. Where nothing that happened was surprising. The one thing that I think is probably the twist that people were talking about was that not alluded to like throughout the entire book. I did rate this one star, and you will likely see it again at the end of the year in my worst books of 2026. I almost said 24 and then 25, but 2026, that's the year. Okay, the next book that I read this year, first book in February, is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Denneman. This was actually the January book pick for my science fiction book club, Libernauts. This was what we read in January. The live show was at the beginning of February. This book I did enjoy. I got through it pretty quickly. I loved like how action-packed it was. I loved the characters, especially Princess Donut, and the humor, which did become a little annoying as the book went on. The humor overall was funny, and it did work for me. I think it really added something to the story. I'm a huge gamer girl, and so the whole video game aspect of this was really intriguing to me. I did do a tandem read with the audiobook, which I highly suggest. The audiobook definitely adds a lot to the experience. I will be continuing with the series. Overall, very much enjoyed. I did give this 4 stars. My only complaint is I didn't like how women were portrayed in this book. It came across as the author not respecting women, maybe having been wronged by a woman or two, and therefore seeing them in a negative light. So yeah, not sure what's going on there. I hope that that's not a theme that continues throughout the series. Aside from that, I did really enjoy my time with this book, and I flew through it. I was actually very thankful to read this after reading When the Wolf Comes Home, because yikes. And then the next book that I read is Hot Girls with Balls by Benedict Wynn. I read this for a vlog. I can't remember what the vlog was for, but I did read this for a vlog. I'll have that link down below if you've not seen it yet. This book is about, I didn't even talk about what Dungeon Crawler Carl is about, but I'm assuming you probably know because it's been pretty popular. Anyway, so this book is about 2 trans female volleyball players. They play professionally. They are dating, but they play for 2 different teams. Social media is very much present in this story. It actually kind of acts like a character, being comments on posts and videos, Reddit forums, things like that. So you get a lot of what's happening to our characters through the comments that the public are making about them, if that makes sense. There's not really much plot to this. It's very much a focus on the characters. There's a lot of social commentary. It is a bit of satire as well. I heard that this was supposed to be really funny. It wasn't as funny as I was anticipating it to be, which was kind of a bummer, but there were some funny bits. And there's also some heart to this as well. There is a character in here that is kind of coming to terms with the fact that she also is trans, but she's not out yet, but she's kind of looking up to these 2 influencers who are out and open as trans women. That part and how that story plays out was very, very touching, very emotional. I did cry a little bit. This was a fine read. I believe this is this author's debut novel. Yes. it is. She has written for many publications, but this is her first novel. Overall, I rated this one 3.5 stars. The next book that I read in February is Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. I read this book for the Colors of the Cosmos book club on Fable. They feature a different book by a BIPOC author every month, and this was their February pick. This book was a lot different than I expected. So over the years that I've heard of this book, I heard of it as a horror. And it is a horror, but it's also a bit of fantasy. There's a lot of folklore in here as well. So it's kind of a play on African folklore. It was very interesting. It just was not what I expected, which unfortunately did diminish my enjoyment of reading this book. The premise is really interesting, and that is that members of the KKK are actually monsters. And they kind of like are at different stages. So there's people that, you know, just wear the cloaks, but then there's people that are kind of deeper into it, and they do kind of morph into these monsters. And then the heroes of the story are the Black people living in the South that are being terrorized by these Klan members. And one of those characters, she's kind of deemed a resistance fighter. Like, she has this sword that is kind of instilled with magic in a way from her ancestors. And that's kind of where the folklore piece comes into play. Like I said, super interesting premise. I did like the horror aspects, but I wasn't really expecting the fantastical elements of the story. It just turned out to be something very different than what I was expecting. It was a good read. It was also a really good conversation over on Fable, chatting with the others that were reading along with us. My final rating for this one was 3 stars. The next book that I read was 107 Days by Kamala Harris. This is a memoir of former Vice President Harris and the 107 days leading up to the 2024 elections. This one was profoundly impactful to me. I primarily listened to this via audio through Libro FM, and I'm so glad that I did it that way. It was great to hear her tell her story and to just listen to her speak, and how eloquently and respectfully she spoke, and the things that she said, and how she talked about life, and how she talked about politics, and how she talked about her competition. What I came away from this book with is that I'm so sad for us that we were not lucky enough to have her as president. The epilogue was actually very uplifting, similar to her speech after the results of the election. Basically, her saying, we have more to fight for. This is not the end. We may have lost this battle, but the war is still raging on. I'm very glad that I read this. It does give me hope for the future. This book I did rate 5 stars. Next, I read The Girl I Was by Geneva Rose. The first half of the story, I was so bored. So this is a story about a girl. She has a really bad day. She loses her job. She's awful to her boyfriend who was planning to propose to her that evening. They end up getting into a fight, and ultimately he leaves, and they don't get engaged, and in fact they broke up. Not a great day for her. She goes and gets drunk, and when she wakes up, oh my gosh, the lighting is horrendous. Okay, when she wakes up, it is 2002. She's in her college town. She tracks down herself in 2002 as like a college freshman or sophomore. I can't remember. And they're just trying to figure out how to get her back to her timeline. This character was so unlikable in both timelines. Like, both versions of herself were so unlikable. I almost did like her younger self better. And it's like, if you were a better person when you were in college versus being a whole ass grown adult, that's a problem. The first half of this book is just this like kind of stupid, really kind of stupid. Like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Who are you? I hate you. And then they're reading all these books, watching all these movies that have to do with time travel, and they're trying to test all these different theories. Like, okay, how do we get you back to your timeline? I pretty near DNF this, but a little more than halfway through, things do kind of change. And that's kind of like where the heart of the story lies. And pretty much from that point to the end, I was a lot more invested. So what started as a 2-star book that I really wanted to DNF, I ended up rating 3.5. Is it a great story? No, not really. But I did really appreciate the way it ended. Definitely a tearjerker. There were quite a few parts where I teared up. Not my favorite Geneva Rose, and this is not a thriller by any means. It's just more of a contemporary with some magical realism thrown in. It turned out okay. So yeah, 3.5 stars for that. The next book that I read is Once Upon a Boy Band by Jenny Proctor. This book, I needed a bit of a palate cleanser. I needed something sweet. I needed something that was kind of guaranteed to be at least 4 stars. So my friend Keisha recommended this one to to me. I gave it a go. It is just such a sweet little romance. It's about this woman. She's a vet, and growing up, she had a huge crush on this guy in a boy band. Fast forward to now she's a grown up. Like I said, she's a vet. She starts dating this man who I can't remember if he runs like a sanctuary or like a farm, but he has a lot of puppies like all the time. So they start talking. It kind of turns into a little bit of something. Turns out he is actually the guy from the boy band that she had a huge crush on when she was a kid. My initial thought was, how do you not know? I don't care if his name is different. How do you not know? I mean, okay. He was like a baby-faced kid, teenager, whatever. And now he's looking like a lumberjack and he's got a beard, and obviously his style's so different. It reminds me of movies where people can like put on a pair of glasses and they're completely unrecognizable to people all of a sudden. I don't know. I didn't really buy that. But despite that, the story turned out really, really sweet. I did really enjoy it, and it was a tearjerker. And I don't know if I blame this on my pregnancy hormones, but one part of the book I was sobbing. Like I remember I was making my coffee in the morning. I was just listening to it on audio, and I was sobbing. It was good. It was sweet. It did what I was looking for it to do. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read was Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake. I read this for Jesse's Sleep When I'm Dead book club. This was their February book pick. So this is kind of pitched as a social horror, I guess. The premise of this book is we're following this woman who's a professor at this university, and then we're also following one of the students who's trying to get into the sorority. Dual POV, just kind of bounces back and forth between the two. There's not a whole lot that happens plot-wise, but what this book had going for it was the social commentary. What this book had to say about women and women's position in the world, and how men view women, and how women are viewed by each other, and kind of like what's expected of women. It said so much, and I loved it. I had an amazing time with this book. And so like the whole peak of the plot is this girl dinner, which is hosted twice a year by the sorority. So you find out what that is, you find out what it means, you find out how it affects current members and how it affects alumni. It's very good for her. If you're a woman and you have ever felt like no matter what you do, you are not as good as your male counterpart, then this book is for you. If I recall, in Jesse's book club, not many people enjoyed this book and either DNF'd it or rated it pretty lowly. This was my first Olivia Blake as well, so I'm actually really excited to read more from her. I really liked the writing style a lot, so I'm hoping that, I know she writes a lot of fantasy, but I am hoping that that writing style is very similar in her other books. This was amazing for me, and I rated it 4.5 stars. All right, the last book that I read in February is another banger, and that is Bog Queen by Anna North. It was near perfection. I did not rate it 5 stars only because it did not have that 5-star feeling, but it was pretty damn close. So I did rate this one 4.5 stars as well. It is dual timeline. It follows a forensic anthropologist in current time. She's working in somewhere in the UK, and a body is found in a bog. So she has to go and she has to investigate. She has to study the remains, study the area to try to figure out who is this person, what happened to her. The interesting thing is that the bog had pretty well preserved the body. When a body would have normally decomposed quite a bit, she was not. So they were very quickly able to tell that she was female. They thought for a while that she was this woman that had disappeared like back in the 60s or something, but then our main character ended up determining like, no, this body is much older. And then the other timeline that we see is focusing on this woman, presumed to be the body found in the bog that's being studied by the forensic anthropologist, and she is a Celtic druid. She's a very important person in her community, and we're kind of following this journey that she has to go on. It's really interesting that seeing her interactions with different people in different villages and how they view her as being like this, kind of how we would view, you know, a surgeon in modern day. I really liked it. I love Anna North's writing. This is the second book that I've read by her, and I've loved both. But then also just the huge focus on strong female leads. This lighting. Apparently I need to like sit in front of the window so it doesn't get dark. So sorry the lighting is all over the place in this video. But yeah, so the strong female voices in her stories are great. The thing that I loved so much about this book though is how atmospheric it was. Like we're in a bog or we're in like the British Irish countryside. It's just the way that everything was described. I could feel the wet and the damp and that bog smell. I loved it. It was so atmospheric. I love the way it was written, and just like the sciencey aspect as well. So this book is both contemporary and historical, and it is both mystery and like nerd science. It kind of hit everything for me that I enjoy in books. Like I said, it just, for whatever reason, did not have that 5-star feeling. There's nothing that really could have been done. Like with Girl Dinner, there were a couple things. If it had been done differently, it could have been a 5-star. This book, I don't know what it could have done to be a 5-star, aside from feeling like a 5-star, which it didn't, which is strange. I don't know. The other really cool thing about this book is that the bog itself is kind of a character as well. So we do get a few chapters sprinkled throughout the story, apparently having come from the bog, if that makes sense. If you like strong female voices and you like really atmospheric reads, I would highly suggest this one. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I do have all the books that I mentioned linked down below, both with indie bookstores and Amazon, wherever you prefer to shop. So if you want to check any of these out and add them to your TBR, they are affiliate links. I may earn a little bit at no extra cost to you, but it's there for your convenience if you want to check these out. And let me know if you've already read any of these books and what you thought, so I can see how our reading tastes compare. Thank you so much for watching. Please do remember to like and subscribe, and until next time, bye.